make some sense of it all, but I can see it makes no sense at all. Is it cool to go to sleep on the floor? 'Cause I don't think that I can take anymore. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today's Monday, February 2nd, 2025. And Rath is talking to Vasi Kopolis, talking about Alberta separation, and he's making some good points. It's a 10-minute long interview. I really enjoyed listening to the 10-minute long interview. He held his own, and he said, he held his own and made some very, very interesting points. So I'll share a bunch of them with you. And I think it's worth watching the whole thing, really. CPAC and YouTube scrub the fealty pledge to Carney from the press. There was a press event, dinner, where they're all celebrating each other and self-congratulating each other and things like that. And during that event, a couple of press guys got up and said, "We've got your back, Mr. Carney, like you've got our back." And that's not proper. So they scrubbed it. And people are noticing that and they're highlighting that. And that's interesting. I find that interesting. Certainly. YouTube is not allowing me to connect this morning for some reason. Oh, well. And what else? Setting up vax injury documents. They're sealing the vax injury documents for 15 years. So that is a long time to seal those documents. Pretty unbelievable. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, Blacklock's reporter says, Minister Marjorie PLC's department seals vax and drug injury files for 15 years, says documents run to millions of pages. Not a typo, 15 years. So the documents that they're trying to seal up are in the millions of pages, and they're not going to share this for 15 years? That seems absolutely incredible, and it doesn't seem like anybody's even really aware of that going on. So I find it interesting when that kind of stuff happens, because nobody knows, and nobody's excited to tell anybody except, Blacklocks and me and, some other people, but it's not headline news. And so if nobody knows, then nobody can really oppose it. And so they'll get away with it. Just like the deleting their emails after 15 days. It's a way to not be transparent, and yet they get away with it because nobody's really aware of what they're doing. And that's pretty bad, really, if you ask me. Here is the video again of the guys who are pledging fealty. Mark Nixon says CPAC was given orders by CBC to delete this clip, proof the mainstream media is paid propaganda. And Ryan says, from the mainstream media summit this weekend, this clip has been scrubbed from CPAC. It would be a shame if this was shared endlessly to expose the extreme media bias we face in the country. So here it is again.
Prime Minister, know that every person in this room and the 180,000 people who work in this industry have your back, just as we know that you have ours.
Yeah, scary. And that is pretty, the press is saying very clearly, we're going to carry water for you and the Liberal Party, sir. We'll do whatever you say. And that's scary. Here is Keir Starmer, and he says, what I'm wanting to show you is what a Pabloist is. So June is accusing Keir Starmer of being a Pabloist. And that's somebody who, like the Fabian Society, wolf in sheep's clothing, will come. Well, Grok explains it, so I'll read what Grok says. But Keir Starmer says, I grew up in a working class family, so I know what it's like for parents trying to make ends meet. That's why tackling the cost of living is my number one priority. From April, 300,000 children will benefit from free breakfast clubs, putting money back in parents' pockets. And June says, it's no good trying to add human appeal. You're a hardcore communist-style thinker, as Hitchens says, a Pabloist, the worst kind of communist. This is just where you want people to be suspect, dependent on the state, with your great international leader. You admire China, you suck up to China, you gift us to China. We don't want to live like China. Your legacy is poverty. And Grok, what's a Pabloist? And Grok says a Pabloist refers to a follower of Pabloism, a strand of Trotskyism named after Michael or Michelle Pablo. It emphasizes entryism into mainstream parties to influence them from within, often adapting to existing social or communist structures. In political discourse, it's sometimes used critically to describe hidden radical leftist tactics, as in Peter Hitchens' reference to Keir Starmer's past. So there are people whose entire strategy is to infiltrate and take down or change radically the country, the party, the government from within, and they're called Pabloists, and it seems like that's what we're living through right now, and that's, not great, I think, if you ask me. Holly Doan says minister vetoes recommendations by MPs to freeze rent on military housing. Revenues are important for the maintenance and upkeep of national defense properties, says David McGinty. And so they don't want to freeze rents on the military properties and things like that. Isn't that punitive to the people serving in the military? Why is our country and why is our leaders all against the military? It seems really, really strange, don't you think? I think it's strange. Leslyn Lewis says Canada now has one of the lowest fertility rates in the world. When fertility stats are below replacement level, about 2.1 children per woman, populations shrink, putting the nation's long-term survival at risk. When countries stop having enough children, governments panic because a shrinking workforce means a weaker tax base and social system under strain. Mass immigration has become the Liberal government's default response, but it's a substitute, not a solution. The deeper question is why so many Canadians no longer feel able to start or grow families at all. Sky-high housing costs, economic insecurity, limited support for parents, a culture that increasingly treats family as an afterthought. A healthy society does not rely on permanent emergency measures. It creates conditions where people can afford stability and feel confident welcoming children into their lives. Immigration should complement a strong society, not compensate for one that has forgotten how to sustain itself. Unfortunately, that's what we're seeing. We are seeing our society, that has forgotten how to raise babies because our politicians rely on importing a workforce who is tax paying. So as soon as the population goes up, those kids are 18 and they're tax-paying citizens, or they're getting debt that will be paid back to the government or whatever. But either way, the government is placing them in a situation where they're going to have to work and contribute in a financial way to the taxes and things like that. And that's what they want. They don't want to have a baby that's going to be dependent on the state for a while and cost money. That takes time, and they don't become tax-paying citizens for a long, long time. My government's not going to see any of that money, right? And that's not what they want, and that's interesting. I'm just noticing that my stream is connected to Rumble, but I don't have any viewers on Rumble. The only viewers I have right now are on Locals, and I can't connect to YouTube. It just doesn't let me connect. So I think it's really, really interesting what's going on with the censorship. So I don't know what's going on. I doubt that I'll be able to upload to YouTube later, but we'll see. I have no idea. Anyway, we'll carry on. Alexander, let's talk about free speech. Alexander says, you can't have hate speech laws because hate is entirely subjective. To the Taliban, women's rights are hate speech. Right. That's right. So to the government, anything that questions their good intentions is hate speech. And that's not how it should work, really. That's terrible. And so I find that we are in a situation where our government is trying to justify cracking down on citizens for hate speech laws, and the citizens really, not that I don't think we have a recourse. I think that we'll do what we did during COVID, and we'll just say, no, you can't do that. And people will go to jail, and there will be casualties from this overreach, but ultimately the government will not be able to implement what they're trying to implement without consent. They're trying to manufacture consent, and consent is genuinely you believe that this is the right thing to do. And all of the people who are against the Freedom Convoy, for example, I guess, it seems astroturfed if you ask me. And so all those people who are against the Freedom Convoy were in a situation where they're genuinely agreeing, I guess. And so they're giving consent to have the government move in that direction. But they were wrong, and the government was wrong, and it was ruled illegal, and nobody's been held accountable. And they're gonna try, and I hope they're gonna fail, right? So Dries van Legenhove says, Central bankers at the WEF say the privatization of money is the biggest threat, and then urges for a central bank digital currency to address the threat. So here he is talking about that. And Carney is a central banker. So here we go.
I'm a central banker. Let me insist a bit on at least I gave a speech 2 weeks ago with a triangle of threats and a triangle of answer, but let me sum up. The first threat is privatization of money and loss of sovereignty for many jurisdictions. And we know this is a real fear, especially in emerging countries. But if we have only a currency in the future which is private, and let us be honest, which is issued by American issuers, private companies, then we will have a question on sovereignty. Here the answer is CBDC. As I am a central banker, let me insist a bit on at least
Of course, yes. Central banker. And the solution here is central bank digital currencies. Wild and crazy times, man. I've just connected to YouTube, but I still don't have any viewers on Rumble or YouTube. So I'm going to monitor that for the next little while. It's very, very strange. Anyway, we'll carry on. The remanded says paid boost not applied. I was charged for boosting the pinned post on my profile, but the boost was never applied. The boost function has since been disabled on my account again, and I haven't received any response. I'm simply trying to increase visibility so BC Conservative leadership candidates will answer questions about upcoming changes to BC elections. No response from ad support. Personally, in my view, if those running can't take time to answer the questions, then they don't deserve the position. Posting questions below, all questions are taken from the DER committee and Elections BC recommendations and public. We keep going. Yeah, so it is very, very interesting how situations like this, even on Elon Musk's quote free speech platform, it doesn't seem like a free speech platform. It really doesn't have situations where people, genuine, honest people who are just trying to get to the bottom of the BC elections bonanza, boondoggle. The whole thing is fake, it seems like. And he's got genuine standing. He's got questions. He's had people trying to get in his way, and now X is taking his money and then not boosting his post and then saying we can't boost your post at all. That's that. It seems like it's a rigged stack deck. It seems like the game's not fair. And they know it's not fair, and well, that's how they'd prefer the game to be. And so, man, it's one of those things where I watch these things and I get very, very concerned. Very concerned indeed. Mario says Mark Miller just declared war on influencers. This is communist talk. As the Canadian Constitution Foundation warned us, Bill C-8 would allow ministers to secretly cut off phone and internet service. As an individual who does not comply, including by failing to keep the order secret, could face fines of up to $25,000 for the first contravention and $50,000 for subsequent contraventions. I want to send a message back to him. If they go after me, cut off my internet, I will pay the $25,000 fine and tell the world about their dictatorship regime. This is not China. It's not the New World Order. It's not 1984. This is Canada. The only people that caused a decline in public trust of institutions, is you, the government. And so that's yeah, I think that's true. And I feel in a similar way, I don't have any intention of cutting my show, but I may stop it being a public show. You may have to join my website in order to access it, in order to satisfy aspects of the law that call posting on public forums dangerous and things like that. It's not, but my gosh, like, we're in a situation that is very bad. And again, they're trying to manufacture public consent. So consenting is not something I'm going to do. Ryan says more evidence that CPAC scrubbed the entire recording of the media summit in Ottawa, where Reynolds Maston, the president and CEO of Canadian Media Producers Association, and Kyle Irving, the chair of the CMPA board, were both on stage saying the entire media machine has Carney's back. The thumbnail for the video has not been updated yet on Google. It still shows the original length of the event, recording at 4 hours and 30 minutes. But when you click the link, it only shows a 7-minute clip of only Carney speaking. So they've scrubbed it from the internet. And I already showed it again during this show, but they scrubbed it. And why would they do that? Because the media admitting that they have Carney's back is not good and not how we should run our, quote, democracy, if you still believe that we have a democracy. And I don't think. Still no viewers on Rumble. I think that's really, really odd because usually I have some viewers on Rumble. Anyway, Stephen Taylor, he's a conservative guy. He's a digital campaign manager, conservative, building the movement and party online, he says. And he says, I think we should protect Canada's sovereignty even if the government won't. So I did something about it. The government, Parks Canada, planned to delete a heritage website, but Stephen saved it. And he said, I preserved the 135,000 historical sites 13,500 historical sites before the government could delete them. So that's good. And here's the site. So you can check railway stations, and then you get to see all the railway stations that are historical all across Canada, from Rivers, Manitoba to Kootenay, British Columbia. Kootenay? I'm getting that really wrong. I'm sorry. James, Ontario. That one I can nail. Done that one. Waterloo train station, right? That's just up the road from me. So good for him for actually putting his money and time where his mouth is and doing something for it. Here is Mario, and he's responding to the accusations that the Conservatives are paying influencers, or paying Mario anyway. And he says, the venue was at max capacity. The line outside was massive. People drove from Vancouver, Edmonton, and so many other areas to meet us and take pictures. I've never taken one tax dollar either. One tax dollar. What does that mean? I've never taken one tax dollar. Like the Conservative Party has other funding areas other than taxes, right? Like you don't have to take a tax dollar to be paid by a political party. He could have said, I'm not paid by anybody. But he says, I haven't taken one tax dollar. None of us have. Okay. We all do it for change. I do it for free, and I do it from my basement on a lawn chair. It's not the studio, it's not the makeup, it's cameras or lighting that grew the support. It's the message. Conservative values are Canadian values. We will always speak up, we will educate, and I will do it for free. I'm extremely thankful for everyone that showed up to support. Never in my wildest dreams would I ever imagine anything like this, he says. Thank you, my friends. So there were a lot of people pushing on the CPC AGM, the annual general meeting, saying that this is, there's a lot of flash and no horse. What's the I don't know the phrase, but it seems like there's a lot of fakeness and not a lot of real stuff going on. They passed gender ideology stuff. They passed a whole bunch of liberal stuff. So it doesn't feel conservative, yet these guys are all saying, oh yeah, conservative, true blue, and everything is really, really great, and thanks everybody for your support. Alberta wants to leave. Alberta doesn't see a pathway to a Conservative Party defending their financial interests. And I agree with them. I don't see a pathway for any of the current politicians defending Ontario's financial interests in the face of what's going on. In fact, I see our politicians making deals with China and Qatar and ignoring Trump and trying to tank our trade deal with Trump. And that's not good. That's really concerning because that's not what they were hired to do. Mark Carney was hired on I can make a deal with Trump thing. An anti-Trump banner, sure, but an not having a plan to deal with Trump and get a deal plan, right? And so again, I didn't vote for Mark Carney. Our elections are rigged. He was placed, but you can't get a majority after completely failing at the whole thing you promised in the last election. It's insane. It's insane. So I don't know. They're all part of the same uniparty, I think, and I'm not convinced that anything is going to change course. Our politicians are not even really talking about the things that are important. In fact, when these things are pointed out to them, they have a very weak answer. Conserve what? Says Max G. And he's got the Dominion Society thing, and he's there, and he's enthusiastically interviewing conservatives. And Garnet Genius says, this is Buckham Singh. He fought for Canada in World War I. Sikhs have been building and sacrificing for this country for 100 years. Canada is defined by a shared civic identity that has always transcended religious and ethnic lines. This is what we seek to conserve. Mark Emery says, the Sikhs who came to British Columbia before World War I were all Khalistanis who conspired with the enemy German and Turkish governments to undermine the British and Allied war effort. Of 5,000 Sikhs in Canada in 1914, only 10 volunteered to fight for Canada. And then here's the story as per, I don't know, some AI thing, or maybe it's Wikipedia. I'm not sure. He just took a screenshot. So there's issues with the assertion that Garnet Genius is making. And there was a whole back and forth between Garnet Genius and Daniel that I can't see or the Dominion Society. No, or, I think Daniel got in on this, and he ratioed Garnet Genius. So let's see if I can find it. No, it's not there. Don't make me tap the sign. There it is. Garnet just wants to conserve Trudeau's post-national state where there's no core identity, no mainstream. The reality is this is a shallow version of civic nationalism, only works when the domestic ethnic group remains a supermajority. If not, the result is ghettoization and balkanization. This gets more and more obvious by the day. A handful of Indians being here 100 years ago does not justify the floods entering our country today. And similarly, I was talking about there's one more thing. Oh, it's in the invasion. It's in the invasion part. And it's talking about removing people from certain areas. Right. Britain's countryside to be made, quote, less white under government's nationwide diversity plans. So like in England, they're trying to make neighborhoods and rural populations, quote, less white by importing people from Africa and other places that are not white, presumably. And I'm wondering, are there any countries who are trying, like, is India's government trying to make India less Indian by importing white people into Indian rural towns? Come and bring your breakfast diners? Like, what's going on? Like, does that happen anywhere? Is anybody saying, oh my gosh, we've got way too many Japanese here in Japan. We've got to have initiatives to bring some white people here. Nobody's doing that. So what are we do? Why are we, quote, diversifying places? Why is that happening in England? Why is that happening in Canada? And I find it very, very strange, right? And there's this idea that everybody who's in Canada and who was born in Canada is a Canadian. But if I was born in Japan, I wouldn't be Japanese. I would be a Canadian born in Japan, I think, right? Even there are other examples, and well, I don't want to get into it because I may get myself into trouble. But it's one of those situations where I feel like we're being led down the primrose path by people who don't have our best interests at heart, and because of that, we are making bad decisions, putting forward bad policies, and indeed tolerating a government that isn't really trying to be helpful or stand up for its own citizens. It's only trying to use its resources to import a replacement population or, diversify the country or something like that. Neither's okay. If you have a population of 40 million people and you have a goal of 100 million people by 2100, mainly by immigration purposes, the original population is going to be totally consumed, right? There's only 40 million of the, quote, old stock Canadians, and that's being generous. And if you add 60 million people, the population is totally diluted. The culture is totally diluted. It means nothing. And so post-national state, maybe. And so you're not allowed to have that conversation. Nobody's allowed to talk about that. I guess not, right? And so does Canada not have a culture? Is the culture completely multicultural? In 1914, there were Sikhs everywhere. If you went to the store, every other person was a Sikh. No. Does the fact that there were Indian Sikhs in Canada in 1914 justify the fact that if you go to Walmart now, every other person is a Sikh, depending on where you are, right? Like, it's crazy town. And so, like, do we have a culture? Is the culture worth preserving? If we remove that culture, isn't there a word for that? Why aren't we addressing it? Why aren't we having any kind of conversation about that? Isn't the Conservative Party supposed to conserve those things? Right? No? I don't know. Anyway, with that, we have to say